Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dave from Evil Eye Games. And in this video, we're going to continue on with our talk about making variables. Now, in the previous video, we created a blueprint myActor that we could drop into the world. And we created 4 variables, and we put them into categories. So when we place the actor into the world, we can actually modify the value of these variables. So we want to do the same thing in C++. So first, we're going to have to create a new C++ class. So in order to do that, we're going to go up to File, New C++ Class. And like when we created a new blueprint class, it's going to give us a list of common parent classes. Now we created an actor before, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to select an actor, and we're going to click on the next button. Now it's going to give us the ability to name our actor, and it's going to give us the ability to select where this actor is saved to. So we're going to leave the path default for now, and we're actually going to leave it as myActor. So let's go ahead and create a class. And one thing I would like to note is that it is a royal pain in the butt to rename a class after you create it. And it is also a pain to place it in a different location. So you want to make sure ahead of time that you have the name correct and that you have the path correct before you actually go and create class. So seeing as we're leaving this at default, I'm going to go ahead and click on Create Class. And you're going to notice that it's going to compile the code in the lower right-hand side. And we're going to get to our window in Visual Studio. And the very first thing we want to do in Visual Studio, anytime we create a class, so we're going to go up to the top here, and we're going to click on the 2 disks for Save All. We then want to transfer back over to the UE4 editor, and we want to go ahead and click on this Compile button. And now when we go into our File Explorer here, and we select our tutorial project, we're going to see that myActor exists. So let's switch back over to Visual Studio. And you're going to notice in the project folder here, we now have a myactor.cpp file and we have a myactor.h file. And those 2 tabs should be open in the main viewport here. Now the .h file is what is known as a header file. And in a header file is where we make declarations. And declarations are basically stating that something exists. And in the CPP file, this is known as the source file. And this is where we actually implement what we declare in the header file. So I'm going to click on the .h file, the header file. And the first thing you're going to notice is at the top here, there's this // and then a line of text. And the important thing to note about this // is that this indicates a comment line. And what will happen is that any line that is preceded by this // will be ignored by the compiler. Likewise, any blank spaces will be ignored by the compiler as well. It's just that in coding practice, we enter blank lines in order to format things and break things up. And then you use comments to add comments about what you're doing within your file. So if you end up doing something and not touching it for a couple weeks and you come back later, or if somebody else has to work on your file, they can know exactly what you were doing. Below that, we have a # and the pragma once line. This is a directive, and I'm not going to get into too much detail as to what this does. The only thing you need to know right now is that for Unreal Engine, you're going to want this in here, and you're going to want it to be the first compiled line of code. Below that, we have a # include, and this is a directive again. And what this is telling the compiler is that whatever is in this file over here, include in this file as well. Now, our myActor inherited from the actor class. So in this case, it's telling it to get from the game framework the actor header file and include it in our myActor. So that way, our myActor class inherits everything from the actor class. The next line is include directive again. That says to include the myActor.generated.h. And once again, you want to make sure that this is in the file as well. And basically what this does is when the program actually runs at runtime, it needs access to this generated file in order to work well within the engine. Once again, I'm not going to go into very much detail on this one. You should just know that whatever Unreal Engine 4 plugs in here, you're going to want to be at the top of the file. Next, we run a uClass macro, and I will get into talking about macros when we get into functions. But once again, you should pretty much leave this alone. You're not really going to have a reason to touch this yet. For basic purposes, this is a macro that makes our class friendly to work with Unreal Engine 4. And below that, we have the actual class declaration. So this is where all the declarations are made for our MyActor class. So you're going to have a class declaration right here. You're going to have the tutorial project, so the name of the project _API. And then you're going to have a MyActor. And you're going to notice that it is the name of the actor we just created with an A at the front of it. And this is a standard method that Unreal Engine 4 uses. And the A that precedes MyActor basically is just a prefix that Unreal Engine uses that denotes that this class is a descendant of the actor class. And then there's going to be this colon mark, and it's going to be a public A actor. And we're just going to leave this alone for now. We don't really need to toy with this, and we'll get into this much later. But it's not really important to us at the moment. And then it's going to actually open with a open curly bracket, and then it will close with a close curly bracket at the bottom here, and end with a semicolon. Now, the first thing that is in our class is a generated body macro. Once again, you're going to want to make sure that this is the first thing within this class declaration. Below that, we have a keyword, public, with a colon. And what that's going to do is it's going to set everything that follows this to public. And there's a couple of different keywords that we can use, where there's public, there's private, and then there's protected. And public is going to basically define that any other class can use whatever we define. The protected class is going to limit it so that only this class and child classes of our class can access whatever we define below it. And finally, the private class is going to say that only this class can access this information. Then right below that, we have an MyActor, and this is actually running the constructor. So like in Unreal Engine 4 editor, when we had that construction script, this tells it to run the construction script for MyActor, which exists over in the CPP file. It then makes a declaration for a function for begin play, and we will get into how to make declarations for functions when we start making functions. And then finally, it makes a declaration for a function for the event tick. So we want to go ahead and we want to start declaring some variables. So what we're going to do is below our virtual void tick function declaration here, we're going to add in a comment line, and we're going to call this our added variables. So that way we know that what follows below here is the variables we're adding. So previously we added a Boolean, an integer, a float, and a string. So let's start with a Boolean. So the first thing we're going to have to do is declare what type of variable it is. So for a Boolean, the keyword is bool, or B-O-O-L, all in lowercase. And then we're going to have to give it our name. And I'm going to call this a B lowercase test bool. And then we're going to go ahead and end the statement with a semicolon. And that's all we need to do to declare a variable. Now you may be asking why I added a lowercase b in front of our test bool. And that is a standard formatting thing with Unreal Engine 4. Now, none of the other variables I've seen do this. But for some reason, Unreal and Epic have decided that a lowercase b in front of a Boolean is the standard to go with. So we're going to follow the standard, and we're going to put in a lowercase b before the name of our variable. Next, we're going to have to go in and add in a integer. So for the variable type, we're going to type in int for an integer, and then we're going to give it a name for our test integer. And we'll end it with a semicolon. Next, we have a float. So we're going to go ahead and type in the keyword float, and then we're going to give it a name as test float and end it with a semicolon. And then finally, we're going to have a string. And this is going to be a little different because this is a separate class. So we're going to type in capital F S TRING in lowercase. So capital F, capital S, TRING. And then we're going to give it a name as our test string. And we're going to end with a semicolon. So at this point, we've gone and we declared all 4 of our variables. So let's go ahead and hit Save All. And we're going to switch over to the Unreal Engine 4 editor. And now we can actually take our MyActor and drag it out into the world. And you're going to notice first off that there's no manipulator and no actual presence of the actor. Now, like I mentioned in the video where we created the MyActor and Blueprints, Blueprints automatically adds that root component for us so that we can attach a manipulator to it. If we take a look in the World Outliner, we're going to see that our MyActor is actually selected, so it exists in there, it's just we have nothing to grab onto. Now, we don't see any variables over here, like we do when we click on the Blueprint MyActor. So let's select the MyActor one. So we're going to switch back over to Visual Studio. And in order to make these variables play nice with Unreal Engine 4, there is a macro that we have to run before our variables. So in front of our Boolean, I'm going to go ahead and in all caps, I'm going to type in U property and then open and close parentheses. Now the uProperty macro basically runs some scripting that makes our variable here play well with Unreal Engine. And you're going to notice it has this red squiggly line underneath it for a while. And that's just Visual Studio taking a while to recognize the macro. Now, I have a really beefy system. So I have an i7 4790K that's overclocked with 16 gigs of overclocked RAM, as well as all solid-state drives. And you notice that it still takes a while for it to recognize it on my system. So you're just going to have to be patient with those red squiggly lines, but they will eventually disappear if you typed everything in correctly. Now in a web browser, I actually have the uProperty documentation open, and I'll go ahead and leave a link for that down below. And it talks about different variables. But at the very bottom, we have property specifiers. And we can insert these property specifiers into the macro in order to get it to do certain things. Now, the ones that are most commonly used is we have a blueprint callable. So that means that we can get the function within our blueprint. There's a blueprint read only and a blueprint read write. So with the read only, we can set it so that if we create a child class in blueprints, we can only get the variable, but we can't set it. With read write, it gives the blueprint access to both read and write to the variable. So let's go ahead and add in this blueprint read write. So if we switch back over to our Visual Studio here, inside of the parentheses here, we're going to type in blueprint read write. Now this is case sensitive, so you're going to want to be very aware of that. And this will give Unreal Engine the ability to read and write if we create a child blueprint. Now taking a look back at our property specifiers again here, we move down, there's a category. And we had assigned our variables before into a category. So we want to do that. So after we have blueprint read write, we're going to put in a comma and a space. and we're going to type in category, an equal symbol, and a pair of quotes. And inside of these quotes, we could go ahead and type our category. So our Boolean was in a test category, so we'll go ahead and put that in the test category. And lastly, if we look at our property specifiers in here, there is the edit anywhere. And this is what's going to go ahead and make the variable public so that we can edit it when we drop it into the world. So once again, in our uProperty macro, after our category, we're going to put in a comma, and we're going to type in edit anywhere. Now, the one thing to note about this uProperty macro is we have to insert this before each one of these variables. We can't set it up so that this covers all of our variables. You have to do it every single time for each one of the variables. So just to test this out, I'm going to go ahead and copy this line, and I'm going to paste it in place right before our test integer here. So we're going to go to the top, we're going to hit Save All, we're going to switch back to the Unreal 4 editor, and we're going to go ahead and hit that Compile button. And once we finish compiling, you're going to notice once we have myActor set here, we have a test Boolean in a test category and a test integer also within that test category. So we've effectively done the same thing that we did with our myActor in creating these categories and putting variables within categories that we can edit on the actor when we drop it into the environment. So we're going to have to set up the categories now for the other two variables. So let's go ahead and switch back over to our Visual Studio. And for ease, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it in front of our float. But we had a different category within our editor here. So if I select on this, there was a test category and there was another category. So let's go ahead and change the category in here. So we're going to set this to another category. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this uProperty line in front of our test string. So once again, we're going to go ahead and hit Save All. We're going to switch back over to the editor, and we're going to go ahead and hit the Compile button. And once that finishes compiling, we're going to see that if we select on myActor here, we're going to have our test category, and we're going to have another category as well. Now, we haven't set up any default values here, so that's going to be the next thing we're going to do. So if we switch over to Visual Studio, the header is not where we set the default values. If you notice in the description for our actor here, when we select a variable, the default value is under a separate header here. It's not a part of the details. So this is not set up in the actual configuration of the variable. So in Visual Studio, we're going to have to actually declare these values in the source file. So I'm going to click on the tab for myactor.cpp. And once again, we're going to have some stuff in here. So we have some includes at the beginning. So it includes the myActor header file that we have. And it also includes the project header overall. And you're going to want to make sure that these are at the top. And the next thing to take a look at down below here is the actual implementation of the constructor. So where it has a myActor, : a myActor, this is the constructor. And this runs when this class is instantiated. And below that, we have the actual definition for the begin play, and we have the definition for the event tick. So we're going to leave this alone for now. And what we're going to want to do is inside of the constructor here, there is an open curly bracket and a closed curly bracket. We want to do it within the confines of that curly bracket. Below where it actually starts the call for event tick, we're going to insert a line down. And we're going to want to actually set the values for our variables here. So first off, we have the B test bool. So we're going to type in B test bool, and then we're going to put in the equal sign, but don't ever call it the equal sign. And then we're going to insert a true or a false. So we'll set it to true by default. Now I said don't ever call this equal sign an equal sign because in C++ programming and programming in general, this is not read as equals. This line is read as the B test boolean is assigned the value of true. And then we end every line with the semicolon. So just above this, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to put in a double backslash for a comment. And we're going to say here that we're setting default values for our test variables, just so we know what we're doing below here. So we have the test bool set. Let's also set the value for our test integer. So right below our B test bool is assigned true. We're going to type in test int is assigned, and we'll give it a value of 5 and end with a semicolon. And then we can go ahead and assign the value of our float as well. So we can type in test float is assigned, let's say 9.9 and a semicolon. And then finally we can assign the value of our string. So we can type in test string is assigned, and we're going to have to use quotes for the value of what we want to assign the string to. And we can just say this is a test string variable. And then after the closing quote, insert a semicolon. At this point, we can go ahead and hit save all. And this isn't disappearing yet, which worries me. And that's because I called it test integer. So let's go ahead and call this test integer. And this squiggly line disappears. So let's hit save all. And we're going to go ahead and switch over to our Unreal editor. And we're going to go ahead and hit the compile button. Now, once the compile button is complete, we're going to see in here that we have our variables. And because we've already played with the Boolean before, we have this reset to default. So I'm going to do that. But for our myActor1, we're going to see that our test bool is set to true. Our test integer is set to a default value of 5. Our float is set to a value of 9.9. And our test string contains the text. This is a text string variable. So we've gone ahead and we've created our first variables within Unreal Engine 4. One thing to note is that in our header file here with this U property, we're using this because we want to expose these values to Unreal Engine 4. Now, it might be the case that you don't need Unreal Engine 4 editor to actually see these values. So you can actually create variables here without using this U property. It just depends on whether or not you want these to be visible, editable, or read by the Unreal Engine 4 editor. So a couple of big takeaways from this is that we have our header file here, and the header file is where we declare where things exist. And in the CPP file, the source file, we go ahead and we actually implement what we've declared in the header file. So this is going to complete today's video. If you guys have any questions or comments, you can go ahead and leave them down below, or you can head over to my Facebook page and message me over there or comment over there. And of course, guys, as always, thanks for watching.